Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Rare Wellness Podcast, the podcast designed to help you heal holistically and give you the tools that you need to thrive. We're making it easy to understand medicine and wellness with practical steps from the experts, one podcast at a time. The only thing that we ask is that if this episode helps you live just a little bit better and a little more aligned, that you'll leave us a review and you'll share this with a friend. That's all that we ask so that we can continue to provide you with free, valuable knowledge from the experts of well-being. Today, this episode is going to be a part 2 continuation of the one we released last week. We're really diving into somatic modalities, somatic practices, somatic movement, and its incredible impact on holistic healing and also just experiencing life vibrantly as a whole. Imagine not just using movement as a way to trying to quote unquote fix how your body looks or achieve a certain aesthetic, but to experience vitality and work through trauma, regulate your nervous system, and create this openness and expansion for life. That's kind of what we're going to be talking and looking at today. And we have Karla back on. Karla is our movement manager and one of the lead yoga and bar instructors at Rare Wellness. She's also a doctoral candidate at Gonzaga University, where she's studying how to apply the concept of how movement can be a source of healing and restoration for the individual and the collective, blending art, spirituality, and the human experience. She specializes in movement methods, including Alexander technique, Laban movement analysis, and the one I can never say. How do I say that?
Feldenkrais. I know. It's a weird one.
And the Feldenkrais method. Karla, we are so happy to have you back on, and I'm excited to continue this conversation. This is actually one of my favorite topics at the moment because it's something that I'm exploring personally right now. I want to experience vitality. I want to be open to life. So thank you for being back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love to talk about somatic practices, just because of what it's done for me, right? And a lot of things that we have been through, I think we go through them so we can help others. And so
100%.
That's why we get passionate about certain topics is either we're curious about them and we want to experience them, or we have already experienced them. So thanks for having me again.
No, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. If you guys have not listened to part 1, go listen to that. It'll set up a nice foundation and context, especially on the why this matters. Okay, so we've kind of talked about already, Karla, the movement as a facet of our healing journey. Our why kind of into exploring somatic movement and why it matters is just so that we can experience this like vitality as a being of like experiencing life, showing up to life, and making space to experience life in our bodies and connecting our mind and our bodies. But what does it mean, I guess, we experience life as beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, let's dive into the philosophy of what does it mean to be a whole being? What does whole being even mean?
Wow. Wow. You just went through like a few hundred years of philosophy right there with that question. Okay, so I think in the last podcast, I briefly said the word Heidegger. So, and he's one of my favorite philosophers, and he's kind of right in my consciousness right now. So I am learning and researching a lot using his mode of philosophy as my kind of like method when I'm looking at various practices and how I communicate that through the research that I'm doing. And he was known for this idea of being with a big B and beings with a small b. Okay. So beings, and specifically human beings, because there's all things that are being in this world, right? A table is being in this world, and a cat or whatever, right? Gus, the giant bunny that I have. But and that human beings are a specific category within that lowercase beings, okay? And that our role is to facilitate this experience of the big being. So the big B being, I know this might get confusing, but hopefully I'm doing my best I can. Think of it as a specific either person or thing that is observing, absorbing, experiencing, and then making conscious choices based off of those elements. Okay. So we as human beings have this way of being a holistic being, right? So how I experience the world as a big B being is going to be different than you, but that a lot of times we have similar experiences so that then we can have empathy with one another because we appreciate and we value and we see the importance of who you are as a being. I would say that Heidegger was the first social justice warrior, honestly, because he felt like the environment was an important thing that we as conscious beings take care of and recognize that it has value. A lot of philosophers prior to that, the value system was wonky. And I felt like Heidegger did a good job of bringing value back into play, that just logic didn't make you more valuable than something else. And so that's in that experiential process, that is how we truly be these amazing human organisms, these mind, body, spirit, soul. Again, how you see that triad is important to you. And everyone kind of how they categorically identify that is going to be different. And that's okay. But I'm going to value that. And so your process of being is valued as much as my process of being.
So it sounds like there's an element of connection in this.
Yeah, there's a relationship. The idea of relationship had gotten lost in the philosophical world. And I think that's where Heidegger, and he built off of a lot of other amazing philosophers. So I don't want to like take away from that. But I do feel like he did a great job of paving the way for us to remember that we are relational beings.
Yeah.
And that relationship is a part of our experience and our process of understanding this world. And that without it, it becomes flat. It becomes almost, it becomes prescriptive, right? Logic can be prescriptive. And that doesn't feel very fulfilling.
So it's more experiential than it is just logical.
Correct. Yeah.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the Premium Center for Regenerative Medicine and Stem Cell Therapy in the Northwest Center for Regenerative Medicine. Get back to the activities that you love without needing surgery. You can book your appointment at nwc4rm.com. Again, that's nwc4rm.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness Supplements. You can head over to rareplannethealth.com to get your supplements. My personal favorite is the premium fish oil filled with omega-3s. Again, you can go to rareplannethealth.com and get the supplements that you most need to support your health and wellness today. Lastly, this podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness. Rare Wellness is located on the South Hill in Spokane and is one center that provides all the wellness tools that you could need. Whether you're looking for a hands-on, premium, intimate yoga studio with a therapeutic emphasis, bar classes, Tai Chi classes, if you're looking for skincare treatments, injectable, hydrofacial, microneedling, organic spa treatments, if you're wanting to get therapeutic massaged or book functional medicine appointments to get down to the root cause of your inflammation, Rare Wellness is the place for you. Whatever your wellness needs are, they have it covered. So to book your appointment today, go to rarewellness.com. Again, go to rarewellness.com and mention this podcast for 10% off when you're booking. Okay, time to get back to the episode. This relationship, I guess, between beings is this just human to human, or are beings beyond that? Is it nature? Is it people? Is it is I guess does the philosophy extend to that as well?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So within that understanding, everything that we observe right? Our consciousness observes things and experiences that, right? Whatever that is considered a being, lowercase b. Now, the big B being is the experience that that specific thing has within time and space, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And as human beings, especially Heidegger believed we had a duty to kind of facilitate all of these things within the world to have an opportunity to present themselves to us or to our experience or environment. So that's why then, as human beings, experiencing a tree as something with value was important because it was a being expressing itself. But as a human being, my job was to allow it to present itself into this world, to take all of its values, the bark, the needles, the sap, all of that makes it a tree, right? How we understand a tree, and to create beauty within this world. And so that's why environmentalism comes into that, right? It's creating value of things. It's not just there for our consumption.
Totally.
And that was a big distinction and jump in the philosophical world.
I think it adds, from what I'm hearing you say, this philosophy worldview, it adds a layer of like magic and like meaning to experiences, because otherwise, how often are we holding space? How do we interact as beings?
I think the first thing we need to do is recognize the value in everything that we experience, and that we have lost that, especially as human beings. I do feel like, because in my philosophy and my religious perspective, I am soul-based. Like I have kind of this, there is something greater than me. There is something after this physical life, right? So from my perspective is that there is something truly important about my existence, which means there's truly something important about your existence. And that I need to value that, right? I need to see that your experience in life is just as important as mine.
That's beautiful.
My job is to first understand mine so I can best communicate it to you. My job is not to decide if yours is more valuable or less valuable than mine. It just is. So then once we start there, then we can share. Then we can have empathy. Then we can learn. Then we can have this kind of reciprocal exchange of our experiences in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is so beautiful. Also, I just realized, I think I'm going to title this episode, what does it mean? Like what being a human means, because I think you just crushed that explanation.
Cool. Because philosophy is so freaking hard to communicate.
It's like being with a capital B, and no, but it's so, I'm appreciating hearing this perspective, because if we recognize that every human's experience and everything's experience has like value, it changes the way that we approach our lives. It changes the way that we approach interacting with the world. And I feel like it again forces for this intentionality that can otherwise be lost, that really adds, again, we were talking earlier, vitality, meaning to life. It adds this layer of reverence and appreciation for our experiences, for other humans, for the world around us. So I know this term gets thrown around a lot, like energy, right? But I'm trying to think of how to transition into like energies as into like the importance of healing. So I know this term gets thrown out a lot. Like energy, right? And like, obviously, since we're talking about somatic movement, we're talking about healing. And now that we've set the stage with like this philosophy of being and having reverence and space for other people and things, being, how does energy relate to healing and beings and this whole topic?
Yeah. So I would frame it as like properties or categories. Right? So various properties, and I'll go back to my tree analogy, is that a tree has properties, various, whether it's texture, whether it's color, whether it's, heights, width, all of that identify it. But within those properties, there's also those things you can't see, but they are there, right? So just because I can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That is a big jump in philosophy, right? And that logic can no longer make everything make sense, right? And so that's where I think energy comes in, because energy with the right tools can be valued, can be seen, whether it's in a graph or a vibration or a meter or something like that, right? And then that's kind of where it has a source of a material existence, right? A technological existence, right? All these various things that make something concrete, right? It compresses space and time and it makes it accessible. So that's where then our experiences in this world, if you look at yourself as someone who contains things that you can't see, but you know are there, energy makes sense, right? And that energy is almost a property that can be a really great metric in how vital you are.
It's hard to argue with this view, because what about love, right? Like you can't, how do you quantify that, right? Like that's a form of energy. How do you quantify emotions? It's like they're real. But it's a form of energy.
I have something I have to add something really quick.
Go ahead.
Interrupt you. So I was on my spare time, I like to read like peer-reviewed articles. So I'm such a dork.
I love this.
That's the world I'm in. But I was reading a study about like, why do you have gut feelings, right? Like, why do you feel hurt or heartbreak? Why do you have this physical response to something? Like your heart doesn't actually break, Right. So what they found is that the reason why there's such a strong brain gut connection, and like your digestive system is directly related to how healthy your nervous system and like how your brain functions. Well, they found that there are brain cells in your digestive system.
That's crazy.
That's so cool. I'm like, well, no wonder I have like these gut reactions. My belly has this direct line of intelligence in experiencing this life that I'm in, right? And so to me, that just really was a huge aha moment of why my body is such a powerful tool in understanding my experience of this world, right? And how then the energy, right? The energy is like that power or that force that drives you through time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
well, yeah. Regardless of your worldview, from the perspective of, let's say, Christians who, Jesus performed miracles, right? Let's say like that perspective. And then there's a researcher, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who from the scientific side also looks at case studies of people who, with their thoughts, you can think your way into illness, and with your thoughts, you can think your way out of illness and heal your body physically through meditation and changing the energy that you create in your mind, in your body, and surround yourself with. So it makes so much sense, but it's something that we haven't really tapped into, right? So regardless of what your worldview is or how we understand these things, it happens. Yeah. How do you see energy impacting vitality?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I love that idea, right? And I think first disclaimer is one, just make sure that you are doing anything with the guidance of someone who's a specialist, right? Because I want us to like make sure we're not diagnosing, right? I don't want anyone to go, they told me to. Right. It's hard, right? But we're talking about things. If you don't start talking about something, people don't then get curious and then find new awareness, right? So I think that's what's important about podcasts. It makes people curious and to dig deeper into their why. So if two things, like people who are listening, I would love for them to do like their own little like study And people who they see as really angry, grumpy people, I want them to like look at their physical characteristics.
Interesting.
And I'm just going to have you just like write that down. What do you notice? And then people who are really happy, who are joyful, who, seem to be honest about their problems, or who aren't gossips, right? Someone who's a nitpicky gossip, like maybe write down their physical characteristics and like all that. And I'd be curious to see what you saw, because there's a lot of belief that you will physically begin to represent what you think and feel. And so someone who's always angry, always resentful, to me, it begins to have this withering, like dull, dark appearance. Mm-hmm. And they've been starting to find that was presenting itself in people who like to live in those emotional states, right? And the more you stay in angry, judgmental, resentful states, right? Your energetic vibration. So everything vibrates at a frequency. That's not woo-woo. It literally, you can meter it, right?
Physics. The laws of physics.
It's a law of physics, right? So my heart vibrates at a specific frequency. This table vibrates at a specific frequency. It just is. So when you begin to constantly think in the negative, right? You begin to tell your body to lower its frequency. But negative thoughts have a very low frequency. And the higher your frequency is, the more vitality you have. So joy and things that are not necessarily I'm happy all the time, because you also don't want like the toxic positivity, right? When you're so positive all the time and then you're actually just miserable, but you're masking it, right?
Right. That's not true. That's not true joy. That's not true vitality. It's just a mask. No, right.
Exactly. Right. So people begin to increase their frequency by choosing to experience emotions in a way that is healthy, right? Because anger is normal. Anger's normal.
It's also not bad. It's just a signal. It's not something to avoid. It's
Yes. And experience it. Go through it. But we all know when we're stewing in it too long, right? And then it begins to feel good, right? And to me, there's something wrong with anger feeling good, right? Instead of it being a response to something, right? We have emotions so that they can begin to give us the drive to make a choice. Sometimes emotions aren't the most accurate and we need to cool off to make a better choice. But, and that's where cognition comes in, is sometimes we're confused about our emotional responses. And so that's a repatterning and a relearning. But I think that's where he's getting at, is that the longer you stay in this dingy, dark, yucky gray, you're going to begin to resemble dingy, dark, yucky gray. And the human body is meant to absorb light. It's meant to exude light. It's meant to have energy. It's meant to have these specific frequencies at its most optimal level, right? And that's when disease. So anything that has disease or inflammation, its frequency is much lower than what it's supposed to be at. So that's where I think the mind has such a beautiful role in our healing, whether you pair it with something else, whether it's Western medicine. My question is that I don't know how many people, I think everyone's capable, but how many people are truly going to be able to accomplish overcoming all those cognitive obstacles to actually enact that ability to create healing? That's where I'm like,
I don't think so. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I guess in mentioning that earlier, I think it's that our mind is more powerful than we realize. And And yet we are humans, right? Like, or I mean, and yet we have limitations, right? There's only, it's not that you shouldn't seek professional help. It's not that you should, it's just understanding that there is a correlation between the two, and that our mind is more powerful than we sometimes give it credit for. But even our bodies, like, I burned my leg really bad on motorcycle exhaust this week, like super painful.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's incredible how the amount of injuries that I've had, the amount of like stuff that has happened to my body in my short years of life, I am constantly and incredibly amazed at my body's desire to heal itself, its ability to heal itself. And it's like, it's just like we're more resilient than we realize. But I really believe, like, even and I guess I don't know if this is somatic practice or not, but practices of visualizing healing around you, practices of visualizing like that golden light like around your shoulder or the part of you that's injured. And then like people who oh God, I wish I knew the scientific term. I'm gonna rephrase this, but the, you know, then you hear of injuries where and I've read several case studies of there's the physical injuries, and I think in the chronic pain episode with Dr. Lewis, so if you guys haven't listened to that, go back. But there's also there's pain that's physical, and then there's pain that's psychological, where we believe that we are injured or we believe that we are sick, and so we are sick, but our body is not sick, right? So it's just like that is more the concept that I'm talking about versus you got a concussion, now just tough it out, or you broke your arm, just will it into healing. Like, obviously there is space for adjustment, and it's in pair with, to me, but that's just my philosophy. So that was more of what I was exploring when I was mentioning that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That idiopathic, right? So what's physical, what's idiopathic? And what I think is really cool about what Dr. Lewis does and how he's transitioned from looking at pain, though there can be very physical reasons why people are dealing with chronic pain, there's also those psychological elements that contribute to the severity of, or the ability to begin to start that healing process, right? I think a lot of times we become our own worst enemy, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, oh, I'm never going to get better. Well, of course you're not now.
No, it's not.
You know, like if someone tells me all the time, you're not ever going to get better, I'm going to start believing that. So how is that different when I tell myself I'm never going to get better? It's not, right? It's almost worse. And so that's where then our thoughts become either our best or our worst advocate in the goal we're trying to achieve.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the Premium Center for Regenerative Medicine and Stem Cell Therapy in the Northwest Center for Regenerative Medicine. Get back to the activities that you love without needing surgery. You can book your appointment at nwc4rm.com. Again, that's nwc4rm.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness Supplements. You can head over to rareplanthealth.com to get your supplements. My personal favorite is the premium fish oil filled with omega-3s. Again, you can go to rareplanthealth.com and get the supplements that you most need to support your health and wellness today. Lastly, this podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness. Rare Wellness is located on the South Hill in Spokane and is one center that provides all the wellness tools that you could need. Whether you're looking for a hands-on, premium, intimate yoga studio with a therapeutic emphasis, bar classes, Tai Chi classes, if you're looking for skincare treatments, injectable, hydrofacial, microneedling, organic spa treatments, if you're wanting to get therapeutic massage or book functional medicine appointments to get down to the root cause of your inflammation, Rare Wellness is the place for you. Whatever your wellness needs are, they have it covered. So to book your appointment today, go to rarewellness.com. Again, go to rarewellness.com and mention this podcast for 10% off when you're booking. Okay, time to get back to the episode. Well, and even like a side tangent here, which we're really good at, but like side tangent, it's like I've heard in even like child development, if you're in a homeward environment that continuously tells the child like you're not good enough, you're not going to make it, it's really hard to achieve past what you believe, right? Versus if you're in an environment that's like, I really believe in you, you're smart, you're hardworking, you're capable. it pushes that child to achieve to the level of which like they believe that they can. So it's going back to somatic practices. I guess now that we've kind of talked about like how powerful energy is, how powerful the mind is, and like what are some practical somatic exercises that people can do?
So, I mean, somatic practices can go all the way to just breathing, right? Just experiencing a deep breath. They can be doing yoga or Tai Chi or certain dance disciplines. But I would love to encourage us to think about somatic practices as being this tool to bring our identity and our experiences into specific, like, categories and pillars of understanding. And then we use that somatic language to begin to make sense of that, right? And so that's usually where, if something doesn't make sense, that's where the problem arises, right? And so, right, if my ailments don't make sense and I don't know what's causing them or where it's coming from, right? What do, right? You're going to keep throwing stuff at it, right? And you haven't figured it out yet. And that's a lot of times where people are frustrated with mainstream medicine, is that
Totally
away from the
it's
whole.
like none of the doctors I went to knows what's wrong with me.
Right, yeah. So thinking about somatic practices, using that as a tool for understanding yourself. So I think a fun exercise would be, so in our last episode, we talked about like, how do you be in this world and how do you experience and how do you use what you're gathering to make sense of what it means to be you in this world, right? In this, in this mind, spirit, all that. And taking some of the philosophies of Laban, one of the modern world somatic pioneers. So I want everyone to write down these 8 words just to have in your little toolbox. So write down punch, write down press, write down ring, dab, flick, float, and glide. Okay. So when you think of punch, right, it's forceful, like literally it's a punch, right? Think of glide, think of, ice skates, right? Float, think of a feather floating in the air. So it's very literal. It can, right? So you've got that value system there. And maybe just kind of put a few descriptive words underneath those effort actions, like put 4 descriptive words underneath punch, right? It's aggressive, or it's fast, or it's hard, or whatever. So you got that. And so then maybe try and step outside, and maybe you go to a park, or maybe you just walk around your block or somewhere where you can experience nature. And begin to observe what you see and observe how you're feeling. So first, just step out into that space and notice what you're feeling. Just kind of like write that down. Just say, man, I feel relaxed, or I feel stressed out. Like I feel like I should be doing something, but I'm not, right? Some people, it's hard for them to reduce things to then just be, right? So then pick a few things to experience, like experience the tree and just notice, right? Notice, is it maybe gliding through the air, or is it floating? Maybe a bird, or, maybe you see a dog being walked, or a cat, they're gliding across the street, right? And begin to see how those things, those beings are presenting themselves to you and how you're interpreting them. And do that as much or as long as you want, right? And as you experience those specific beings or things, maybe choose 5 or 6 of them. Underneath them, write down how you feel about them, what value they have to you. Maybe you're like, you don't like cats. You're like, low on the totem pole, right? But this is still an exercise. And then think about, like, then from there, the emotion that you have attached to that, right? Now you see these 8 effort actions. right? You have these emotions, you have this value system. Now in your safe container space, whether it's in a room or in your living room or, in a closet or something, begin to move that. So what does a cat gliding look like in your body, right? Or what does, a leaf floating in the air look like in your body? And I think that makes somatic movement accessible to those of us who aren't familiar with dancing or being comfortable in our bodies. Like I think I can understand because I've observed, I've experienced, I see that leaf presenting itself in my environment. I consciously see it. Now I can then begin to understand it through physically replicating what that is underneath these specific categories that I've created, right? So it's like you're reducing all the clutter and using these sources of information to help you understand. And then when you use your body, you're like, wow, I feel so peaceful when I'm pretending to be a leaf floating in the air. It's like, okay, why is that? And just explore that. Like, what's your body doing? Or maybe what comes up in your mind? Maybe it's a person or a place or whatever. And it's going to be interesting to see where that rabbit trail goes. And don't be afraid of that rabbit trail, because that's probably something that you can't, right? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It's something that you haven't been able to see that's now presenting itself as there. And it's like, cool. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, I forgot about that, right? So then explore that. What does that feel like, Also,
I love it.
Wow, that makes me angry. And a leaf floating. Why am I angry all of a sudden, right?
Explore it. Well, and I love that you're talking about it can start cerebral. It starts with noticing, right? It starts with experiencing in my mind, like logic, like not logically, but like just observing, right? And then it turns into embodying. And then that turns into, and I just think making a practice of just slowing down and noticing. I'm excited to try this because it's a lost art in our society. We don't sit anymore. How often you don't see people just savoring their cup of coffee, like on their porch in the morning, listening to the birds. We don't do that anymore. No. And like, there's so much, like, I hear you saying, like, the more that you practice that art of observing, of slowing down, of noticing, and then embodying and moving, like, eventually the awareness that gives you to, like, oh, I feel anger and I'm holding it in my stomach. I feel anger and let me, like, figure out what's happening. It's just like, and it's at the beginning, I think it's hard because you don't know if you're feeling something from a long time ago. You don't know if you're feeling it from yesterday. You don't know where that feeling's coming from. And so it's like, I feel like at the beginning, the process of moving through those emotions is like so heavy and so much because it's your first, it's like going into like a house you've been hoarding stuff at and like going through that initial unsorting. And then eventually when your house is clean and it's just so much easier because you're like, oh, I know where this belongs and you can put it back, Right. I don't know if that made sense, but that was like, yeah.
It's that philosophy of the onion, right?
Right.
There's layers that make up a whole. And the more that you do something, the easier it becomes. And so, and I think it's really cool that the more you do something, the easier it becomes. But as you get closer to the core, that's more like different and hard stuff. But you've been prepared to be able to face it authentically.
Yes.
Right. So you've been through those stages, those baby steps. And so, only do it for 5 minutes. Don't go out for an hour and then you exhaust yourself and you're like, I never want to do that again. My brain feels like it explode, or I'm just wiped out. That. Don't do that. We're so good at doing things like that. But just try something basic and take only 5 minutes to do it and just see what it's like. Maybe just observe one thing, right? And then how do you embody that experience of understanding, using our consciousness and our ability to observe our experiences in this life can help us then, our body can help us then sift through that information. Like it's so like good. Water going back and forth in between cups and you're sharing and eventually the substances are going to be the same. Right?
Yeah, no, that is so good. And follow, I love what you said about like being intuitive with it. Like follow the rabbit trail, see where it takes you. I think so much of this is so powerful because you might be the other day I was feeling so agitated at my partner. I was like, why am I feeling agitated? And then I realized I've been anxious for 3 days. And it's like, okay, instead of me I'm trying to find a way to make my external environment match my internal emotions. Instead of like, I'm trying to create chaos so that I can match like what I'm feeling. But instead, what if I use somatic practices to regulate how I'm feeling and then see if those external issues are still there. So it's just like there's so many ways you can take this, and like it's so powerful. And the other thing I was reading about the other day is how our subconscious mind will, all the statements that we make about ourselves and about the world, it can't differentiate between what's fact and what's not. So if we say I am ugly, I am stupid, I am whatever, like your brain takes that as a fact, right? And so it's like taking the time to create space in our bodies to figure out what we have been believing, and then rewiring those with somatic practices, and changing the words we say about ourselves can change. Because otherwise, if I believe that I'm not worthy to be, let's say, a business owner or a dancer, whatever it is that you believe, when you're out in that situation, let's say at the gym and you're trying, or you're at a yoga class and you're trying, and it's like, oh, I don't do yoga, and you've told yourself that a million times, your body's going to create a reaction to match that internal truth, that fact. And it's like, well, you don't do this, so why are you doing it now, right? So it's like, it's just this, like, I don't know, just reading about it, learning about it, hearing you talk about it is just so mind-blowing. And the ways that we can practically go in and use somatic practices, use the words that we speak over ourselves, use the way that we move our bodies to rewire that internal belief system so that we can experience this vitality to life is just such a gift. It's such a gift. Yeah.
I think it makes me think of how we've talked about energy and how like these value systems that we've created, whether it's using like LABA and EF for actions, or, you know, colors or things like that, or however it makes sense to us, right? That energy helps us anchor our understanding of a specific object or being within our time space. And so, like, even adding in that exercise, the idea of like, what kind of energy do I feel that tree giving me?
I love that.
Does it feel refreshing? Does it feel like odd? Whatever, right? And I think what's fascinating is that everything that's living has some sort of a similar biological connection, right? Whether it's an energetic or substance down to the like the atom and how it's been created, those particles that make up who we are, right? And I think looking at energy in that sense is like, how do I share my existence with that tree?
So
I don't need to know the science behind it. I will never know the science behind it. But what I will know is how a tree makes me feel, and then how, when I'm using my body, like how that makes sense to my mind, right? And where that takes me, and how that value system of energy begins to give me a richer understanding of my experience of being me, right? And when we begin to see that relationship as an exchange of energy instead of good or bad or different or same, it takes away the hierarchy of how we begin to like cognitively believe in one thing or not. Like I think it creates an even playing field, right? It takes away that judgmental perspective, and it just creates that space for what is.
Yeah. And then a step further, it's like, okay, like when we can practice those things on a micro scale, what is that going to do to our lived experience, even with other people? It's like, how do I the gift of being able to make my energy known, like you were talking about, like the interaction between, like, let's say tree or nature and human, that it's like human to human, like this openness to like, how do I hold the gift of who I am to the exchange of who you are, and just let what is be and experience that exchange. Like that is living, like that is relationship. That is so beautiful.
And when you come across someone who's not experiencing something authentic, I hate the word authentic, because what is authentic? But like
aligned
or truthful, right? You're going to notice that you feel disconnected.
Yeah.
Right? So when someone's energy doesn't feel right, or that exchange feels like it's being stolen from you or whatever, right? There is a disconnect. There's not the sharing perspective, right? And that's where then we, as a holistic organism, human beings, that's where we run into problems.
Yeah.
If I'm not truthfully trying to understand my existence in this world, I can't present myself to you in a manner that is going to be truthful, and that you're going to feel this disconnect, this relational gap.
Well, that's why it's so draining to be around like fake environments, right? Like it's draining, and it takes a toll on the soul. So energy never lies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Karla, thank you so much for taking your time. I think we've been talking for like 2 hours, and I'm so happy. Like I feel like when we start talking, we just can't stop.
Keep going. I love it.
But I loved learning from you and picking your brain and getting to experience your being. And I'm just excited to share this with everyone else. So guys, if this conversation sparked questions or ideas or an experience in you, I would love if you guys messaged us at the Rare Wellness Podcast on Instagram. And sent in questions. Does not have to be related to this, can be anything medical, might be about energy, might be questions for Karla in the future, could be questions that you want asked to another expert. We're here to create space for good conversations and to help empower you with the tools that you need to thrive in life and experience vitality. And somatic movement and experiences are just a piece of that. So Karla, thank you so much again for being on, and I'm excited to do this again sometime. So yeah.
See you later, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.